Jesus. This evening, first of all, he will be talking about transforming sorrow into joy, a Spiritist perspective. A little background into who he is. Flavio is an avid student. He has been contributing to the Spiritist movement across the U.S. and abroad. Since 1999, he's held different positions at the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Massachusetts. And between 2008 and 2012, he acted as the programs director for the United States Spiritist Council. Professionally, he leads a global strategy and planning team. He has a Bachelor's of Science in Engineering, a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, and a Master's in Business and Administration focused on strategy and leadership development. He lives in Boston with his wife Flavia and their two beautiful twin daughters, Amelia and Teresa, or Teresa, depending on how you want to pronounce that. They're adorable if you haven't seen pictures of them. Flavio, please.
Yes, testing. 1, 2, 3. We're good? All right. So before we start, we'd like to express our deep gratitude to our friend Daniel for the invitation to spend a few minutes amongst friends here and really get to know a little more about this important topic. But before we get there, our gratitude also goes to our Professor Jesus, whose inspiration, right, should be in all of our minds, in all of our actions, in all of our thoughts. We do that too. And we'd like to thank our Heavenly Mother and Father God for the blessings that we all have been receiving throughout our lives, and for those blessings, for those opportunities to learn like this one that we have today and future ones. And for you guys, we thank you in advance for your attention. And hopefully I won't make anybody to sleep in the next 60 minutes or so. So thank you so much. Today is a day of joy. Not because it's a beautiful weather outside, because it's not, but it's actually better than Boston. Boston about 27 degrees right now. So you guys are actually in a better, a polar vortex than we are. So it is a day of joy because we're here. We're alive, right? We're creatures of God. And more importantly, we have already made the decision to be here, to spend a few minutes of our precious lives, to get to know more about Jesus' teachings. So it is a joyful moment. But the question is, why do we put sorrow into joy? Or why do we put sorrow and joy together in the same sentence? Because that's our life. That's our lives, right? Our lives are not only made of joy and not only made of sorrow. It's usually a combination of the two. So my proposal for you guys, today or tonight is to really show some academic research, show the Spiritist perspective of why we need to do in order to transform sorrow into joy. Let's do it? Yes. Let's go? All right, so let me start with this gentleman. Maurice Bickham. Does anybody know him? Nope? So Maurice Bickham is a native Louisianian. So he was born and raised in Louisiana. During the Civil War, Maurice Bickham, fearing for his life, was at home when two deputy detectives knocked on his door looking for somebody else that looked like Maurice Bickham. So Maurice Bickham looked and he saw those two detectives, those two police officers, and he thought that his life was in danger. What does he do? He goes and opens the door, but with a gun in his hand. Those officers, also fearing for their lives, pulled their guns out, and then Maurice ends up shooting those officers. In a very freaky accident, if you can say that, right? So Maurice gets incarcerated. He gets sentenced to death. Life sentence he gets. The curious about this is his grandparents came from Africa, who were former slaves. They spent time in a plantation in Louisiana called Angola. Maurice gets sent to the same place, now Angola prison. And he spends a lot of time in Angola prison. So, do you think somebody like him can really transform sorrow into joy. It is very difficult. Very difficult. At one point, they asked Maurice, what was your experience when you were incarcerated? By the way, he spent 14 years in solitary confinement. I can even fathom to understand a day by myself, locked in my house. Imagine 14 years in solitary confinement. I can't, right? It's just impossible. But yes, he did transform all that sorrow, all those very difficult moments, in one of the most inspiring stories of someone that transformed, that changed his life for the better, or for the much better. Stay tuned, they'll come shortly. So, before we get there, maybe just some kickoff questions. Why do we suffer? Have you guys thought about that? Why do we suffer? And I'm just talking about, I cut my finger and I got to put a Band-Aid in here. And that's not the suffering I'm talking about. I'm talking about deep, really tough suffering, right? Why do we suffer? Have you thought about that? Right? Yeah, I'm sure you have. Right? Maybe have come up with some conclusions. Would love to hear them when we open up for Q and answers. Right? Why some people were born in perfect bodies, others were not. Right? When you look at this beautiful Raphael, right? Perfect, healthy, smiley, make all these great noises, perfect. And I see other kids being born without limbs, without, much more difficult situations. Right? Does that mean that God loves one more than the other? Right? So why does all these things happen? Right? Those are very important life questions that most people ask them. Right? And then finally, can we live perfectly happy on earth? Like your life is 100%, it's perfect. Not even Kim Kardashian could do that. Imagine us. So that's impossible. But I'll tell you why that's impossible, right? In a minute. So let's define joy. So according to the dictionary, I look a baby like that, or Raphael is much cuter, right? Raphael is much cuter than this baby. I can guarantee you. If I ask a very neutral person, Kirsten, is Raphael cuter than much cuter, much more handsome? Yeah, exactly. So the dictionary tells us that joy is when you feel that emotion that's really brought up by success, well-being, good fortune, or by the prospect of really what one desires, which is delight. So for example, when you're very hungry and you think about that lasagna or that specific dish that your mother used to cook or their favorite restaurant, right? When you think about that you're hungry, what happens? You feel joy. Yes, I'm gonna eat that. Yes, that's tonight. Yeah, great. So that happens, right? I see some people elbowing each other. That happens, right? So, for example, a mother or a father or a parent sees or feels a lot of joy when they see their kids walking their first steps. And if you're a mother or a father, did you feel that? I did. I couldn't stop crying when one of my daughters started to walk by herself. It's like, oh my God, she's walking, oh my God. It was amazing, right? Because they really, wow, I can't explain that. We can't. That feeling that really comes and we just can't explain. That is joy. But on the other hand, if you look at sorrow, what is that? It's that feeling of deep distress. Yes, deep distress. It could be caused by a loss, disappointment, some bitter misfortune, right? That we suffered. When somebody, does something bad to us, right? When somebody really disappoints us, somebody tells us does something else, right? We may feel sorrow, right? Or when somebody passes, right? We feel sorrow. That's normal. By the way, if you don't feel that, is something wrong with you. There's definitely something wrong with you. I'm going to guarantee you, you should go look for some assistance, some professional help, because it's something wrong with you. Because it's normal. That's part of our lives. We don't live always joyful moments, always moments full of sorrow. No, it's a cycle, right? Sometimes we're here, sometimes we're there, sometimes we're there. The question is, how much time you spend here in joy, how much time you spend there in sorrow. That's only up to you, to nobody else. And nobody else controls that but you, folks. Right? Actually, before I get there, I have a story I want to share. There was a good friend of mine now that before was somebody that I just was an acquaintance. His name was Ron, and he used to live in Miami. And then I used to meet Ron, and and one day he goes, "Hey, dude, I follow you on Facebook and on Twitter, and you go all these places, this Spiritist thing, and you do, and can you just tell me a little bit more about it? Because I see that really it's important for you, right?" So yeah, it's really important for me. Can you just tell me a little bit about that? So I gave him the speech, right? Hey, my life changed, right? I was born into a Spiritist family, but the moment I really brought the thought into my own life, I changed as a person. My problems were still there, but the way I looked at them were totally different. So I gave him the speech. Okay, thank you, great. Here's the book for you. Gave him the Spirit's book. Never saw Ron again. I thought, maybe he didn't like my gift. I don't know. I thought, something, I don't know. So a couple of years passed. I go to Miami to do a talk like this. I see Ron first chance. Like, whoa, that's Ron. But because I came in, my flight was delayed, so I didn't have a lot of time to spend before the talk. So I couldn't really talk to Ron before. So I started, giving the talk and talking about it. And then all of a sudden, Ron goes and he's going to give passes. I said, wow, what happened? Right? Wow, he's a worker. Wow, that's impressive. So everything, finishes, and I go talk to Ron. I said, Ron, what happened? I haven't seen you in a couple of years, and look at you here working, dedicated, committed, driven, purposeful, and doing all these things. He goes, yeah, I read. When he gave me that book, I said, man, that's a very thick book, right? Yeah, I'm not gonna read. Yeah, right here. I'm not gonna read this. It's I can't read this. It's too big. But then one day I'll just open, randomly, and one day you open this up, and one day that book changed my life. Because I was going through some very personal problems, and the page that I opened gave me the answer I was looking for. I said, gosh, I got to do something about it. This is a sign. It's an indicator. What do? I go online, look for the closest Spiritist center to my house. That's where I came. I've been here 2.5 years. I go to the study meetings. I'm committed, I'm driven, I'm helping, and all those things. So, wow, that's amazing, right? Here's my conscious mind that I am. I gotta get something out of this, right? Because this is a great story. And I said, Ron, what's the best thing that you learned from Spiritism? And he said, Flavio, I'm going to give you the best thing and the worst thing. Is that okay? I was like, sure, no problem. He goes, the best thing that I learned, or the Spiritism taught me, was this. Every great thing that happens to me, I'm responsible. I said, okay. Every bad thing that happens to me, I'm responsible. And I said, yeah, it's cause and effect. Everything happens for a reason. God loves all of us equally. I get that. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that's the best thing. Best thing. But the worst thing that happened to me is, or the worst thing that the best thing that happens to me, I'm responsible. And I said, okay, where is he going with this? And all the not so great things that happened to me, I'm also responsible. I said, oh, hang on a second. Now you confuse me, man. So the best and the worst thing that happened to you were the same. I said, yes. Let me explain to you. When I was growing up, my life was very tough. I grew up in poverty, sometimes living in projects, the whole story that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. But then I used to blame my mom, my dad, my siblings, my school, my city, for all the misfortunes that happened to me. I used to blame him. The color of my skin, he was black, he's black. But then I learned that, no, we can't do these things. Because all of these, right, are part of our condition, are part of what hell needs to happen in our lives for us to get better at it, for us to transform all these into better things. And I said, I get that. What about the part that, but exactly. So the other part is, I don't blame things anymore. Because if something bad happens to me, I try to understand the reason for that. Before, there was a lot of blame, a lot of excuses, a lot of stories. Now I own it. And ever since I changed the paradigm, I changed the mindset, my life completely changed. And that, I give thanks to Spiritism. Because it really opened my eyes for it. And that story is a good segue for our own, dichotomous thinking. You may be asking, what? I mean, that's a difficult word. Very simple. The word means either this or that. Dualism, right? There's only two ways of seeing things. Have you heard the expression, oh, this is not black and white, it's like in the middle? That's a dichotomous thinking. Our brains are hardwired to think about either this or that. And really, or not really often, seeing things in the middle. That actually comes from a doctrine called Manichaeism, right? That was from the Middle Ages, that really shows that if something is good, it's good. Everything else must be bad, therefore. Right? There's not something in the middle. There's this dualism into something here and something there. And if you look at dichotomous thinking, I mean, it's as simple as yes or no. There's no maybe. Right? As a matter of fact, for those of you who are in school, if a teacher asks you a question, always the right answer, there's one answer that never fails. You know what that is? It depends. Hey, it depends. Well, what depends on? It depends on the condition, the situation, the parameters. It depends. Always works, guys. Anyways, so good or bad, you're either good or bad. You're either black or white, fair or unfair, happiness or sadness, war or peace. And if you look at specifically this one, that's what we're talking about here, right? If I'm not sad, if I'm not happy, therefore I must be very sad. That might not always be the case, right? You might not be happy, like thrilled, but you might not be that sad either. Where is it the middle? And that oftentimes is forgotten. It's not even known by most of us. If you don't stop to analyze things, right, in a non-dichotomous thinking, we get caught up in this trap. And that's why people usually say, oh, I'm so sad today. What happened? Oh, it's cold. It's snow, and that's it? I mean, that's the only reason why? Right? It's cold. Right? But again, because we're not really taught since early ages to look into things from a holistic perspective. This is the norm. Right? This is the norm. When you look at joys or sorrows, right? Look what we see in the Spirit's book. Humans cannot enjoy complete joy while on earth. Because life has been given to us, to all of them, right? As either a trial or an expiation. But it depends on us, all of us, to mitigate our misfortunes and be as happy as possible while on earth. That's Ron's example. That's exactly Ron's example. Because sorry, I'm kicking this thing. It's, as a matter of fact, I don't usually drink water because I've actually spilled water a couple times while we're talking. That's why I put a little away from me because I'm a little concerned that I may break things, and I actually have done that before. But that's okay. So we are actually responsible to try to mitigate as much as possible our sorrows. Because guess what? You have them. If you haven't had, it's going to be a matter of time. A very good friend is going to pass. Your parents are going to pass, right? Sometimes a loved one is going to pass. Sometimes, diseases knocking our doors. Sometimes you lose your job, or sometimes there's a lot of things that happen in our lives that, guess what? It takes us back. It's like you walk 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards. If we let that happen, right, it's a downward spiral. But knowing, as we know from Spiritism, that these things are going to happen, just a matter of time, gives us totally different angle to look into things. In the example of Maurice, in the example of Ron, right, they really used some of these things to change their lives. How do we do that? how do we really understand what happiness is? Because guess what? Happiness is not what appears to be. One example, if money was the only source of happiness, you wouldn't see, psychologists treating very well-off people for depression. You wouldn't see very rich and famous people committing suicide. We know that. But what is happiness? Have you ever thought about that question? Is happiness the same as joy? What do you think? Let's do a test. So if you think that happiness is the same as joy, raise your hand. Okay? So if you think happiness is different than joy, raise your hand. Okay. So if you're sleeping, raise your hand, because I'm actually missing some hands. There's no maybe here, guys. That maybe doesn't work here. So happiness is not as joy, right? So can happiness be the same as pleasure? Can we be happy amid so much suffering, right? Even amongst people that don't even have minimal needs. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I was in San Francisco, and I was astonished to see the amount of homeless people on the street. I mean, I go there all the time, and I haven't been there maybe 6 months. But the number just quadrupled, I don't know, just everywhere. And I thought to myself, oh my God, without even trying to go into the reasons and the whys, I was just trying to feel or trying to drive some empathy, right? What is it to live on the streets, That must be very horrible. But then I gave a couple of more steps, and I saw a guy that was laughing and talking and super happy. And I said, okay, hang on a second. And he wasn't like drugged or anything. I mean, you could see he wasn't like high or anything. He was just happy. I said, I got to talk to this guy. I have to talk to him, It's just, I can't leave here if I don't talk to the guy. So I stopped and said, hey, excuse me, I just couldn't not notice that you're like very happy. Right? I mean, how are you? He goes, I'm very happy. I said, I can see that, but what's causing that? Well, I got food, I ate already, And he gave me so many reasons that I said, okay, all these reasons, I have them too. But I'm not as joyful. I'm not as happy as he is right now. Because I'm looking at his fellow, friends, and they're in tough shape. They have no shelter, no roof. I said, that really challenged my assumptions on happiness. And then I look at this, right? Can we be happy amidst so much suffering on earth? Apparently for that person, his name was Joe or Joseph, one of the two, right? For Joe, the example that I gave, it was possible. Is it possible for us? It definitely should. It depends, no. It should, right? Because as we learned from Immanuel Kant, who was one of the philosophers that wrote The Critique of Pure Reason, and this particular quote I got from Metaphysical Principles of Virtue. And look what he writes. Happiness is the continuous well-being, enjoyment of life, complete satisfaction with one's condition. My example, Joe, I can guarantee you, I don't believe he has ever read anything about Immanuel Kant. But he was the pure example of this. He was the demonstration, 100%, that happiness, you know what? I've had this, I've had that, but right now I'm actually very happy. Because I ate, because I got clothes, because I'm hanging out with my friends, I'm looking the street, and I said, look at this. Right? So notice that Immanuel Kant doesn't say happiness is this or that. Or happiness is not a place. Even though mid of January in Boston, I really wish we lived in Florida, but that doesn't happen. But it's okay. So it's not a place. It's not a, no, it's not. And when we see things like this, if I'm not happy, does that mean that I'm feeling a lot of sorrow, a lot of sadness? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because our happiness, look at this beautiful quote. In this book, What is Spiritism? I don't see here, by the way. But anyways, here's my, oh, it's right there. Our happiness is going to be naturally proportional to the happiness we provide others. And I'll tell you, my example, Joe, he was singing, he was hanging out, was talking to his friends. He was being very joyful to that community of people. That once again, I can't understand their dynamics, but he was being very joyful. He was showing them, or he was giving them a great time. And he was happy. So I go, I got to use this phrase because it really resonates with what Joe did or was doing. Right? So it's really, really important. So if we fast forward to maybe some academic research on happiness, right? Yes, believe it or not, there are some researchers, actually quite a few, that have been studying what happiness is. How do we achieve that? How do we conquer? How do we drive? So I'll give you the gist of some of the research that I read on happiness. These are some of the things that drive happiness. I'll pause so you can read. So, relationships and social interaction, yes, that gives us happiness. Like here, what we're doing here, we're gathering amongst friends, right? Yes, it's a joyful moment. Marital status, it's usually more women, guys. I'm sorry, but you know, I'm gonna be married. I'm just gonna be so happy, and it's usually the case, right? I get it, but it is what it is. Employment, right? If you're employed, especially in this day and age, yeah, that drives happiness. When you get a new job or a job, you get so happy. Right? You get, oh yeah, I got this job I was really trying to. I applied for. 20 interviews later, I'm here. If you're healthy, you're happy, because without health, it's very difficult to be really joyful. Right? When you get the news right away, we'll get there in a minute. Optimism. Folks that are true optimistic people are usually happier than others. Right? Religious involvement. This really, speaks to all of us. The more you are involved with the religious organization, the happier you are. The sense of belonging, right? The gathering together. Actually, did you know that what the word church means? What does church mean? The word church means simply the congregation, the gathering of people. So every time you gather, you get together, amongst folks that have the same ideals, that could be seen as a church. That's what the word church means in its original form. Income, right? Yeah, if you make money, the likelihood of you being happier is pretty high. And get this, the closer you are with happy people, the happier you become. So next time somebody tries to become your friend, are you a happy person? Because if you're not, I'm still not going to hang out with you. It's not going to work. We're going to stop right here. Yeah. So the more you hang out, the more you stay close to happy people, the happier you get. That's what academic research is telling me. Now, the million-dollar question that I'm sure you're asking in your minds, can money really buy happiness? No? You want to do the exercise, the hands again? You want to do it? So if you think no, raise your hand. Wow. Guys, I need all hands at the end. I'm going to count all hands, please. If you think yes, raise your hand. Nobody. If you don't care, raise your hand, because I'm actually missing some hands again. So you don't really think money can buy happiness. I disagree. And so does the research. Money does buy happiness. So long as, pay attention, so long as you spend the money on someone else. So if you think, girls, going out there, buying new shoes, it's going to make you happier, sorry, disappointing, not going to happen. Guys, if you think going out there, buying new toys, sorry, ain't going to happen. But if you use your money to really buy somebody a sandwich that needs to eat, or somebody a gift, or if you buy your spouse a diamond ring, whatever it is, right? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So that's according to Michael Norton, and the book that he wrote is called Spending money on others promote happiness, based on his academic research. So let's bring it back to Spiritist ideals. Luke told us, actually Jesus told us, and Luke wrote, and we can read that these days, give, and it shall be given unto you. The more we give to others, the more we get. That's the message from the scriptures, right? What does that mean? The more you give, the more you get. The more you give your time, your attention, right? Sometimes financial resources, right? The more it's going to be given unto you. The appropriate use of financial resources, yes, they promote well-being. So long as you don't go into superfluous things, right? They drive social and technological progress. They do. I'll give an example. Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, they create the Gates Foundation. That foundation alone has donated billions of dollars trying to develop the cure of cancer. There's a lot of initiatives that they're driving thanks to donations, not only from Bill and Melinda, but other billionaires that are trying to really do a difference or make a difference in the world. They do drive social and technological progress. Financial resources can assist those who are in need. Yes, they can, right? They drive prosperity, and all of these, right, drive happiness. In addition to that, financial resources is an excellent tool to foster intelligence, because guess what? You actually need to spend money to drive intelligence, to read a book or to go to school, or right? You need to have money. There's no other way, right? Knowledge, capabilities, and etc. That's exactly what Joanna de Angelis tells us in this book called Moral Laws of Life. Because all of us have financial resources, some more than the others. We know that. The question that you should be asking yourselves is, am I spending on things that are making sense? These things make sense. If I spend on these things, I'm actually living happier lives. That's exactly what she's telling us. And if you're using your money to drive education, to acquire knowledge, right? That's also driving you to live a happier life. That's what Joanna is telling us, guys. So the question for you is, why is there so much inequity in the world, or so much unrighteousness, right? I'll give you an example. This is in Bangladesh, and you see this very poor family driving a horse carriage, maybe collecting some trash and stuff like that, and you have a very, exotic sports car in the back, side by side. This is my hometown, Sao Paulo, and this is a slum, and this is a very luxurious apartment. Notice, every porch has a swimming pool. Every porch. The picture doesn't do justice, but each apartment here has about 6,000 square feet. That's not your typical apartment that you're used to know. Okay? So imagine having a swimming pool in your porch, because you can't just go hang out in a common swimming pool, right? You have to have one just for yourself. And these people have these people as neighbors. What a dichotomy, right? The uber rich and the miserable living side by side. So why is that there's so much inequity and so much unrighteousness in the world? Have you thought about that? Why is it that some people have a lot, others not so much, others have a good chunk of resources financially and whatnot, others don't? Those are some of the questions that have been asked through all times. And up to now, to my knowledge, my personal knowledge, nobody could answer this better than Spiritism does. Because if we look, right, Kardec says in the question 925, fortune, meaning this guy's, right, is a trial that's usually more dangerous than poverty. As I showed you in the previous slide, the proper use of financial resources, if you don't do that, right, you actually bring in additional sorrows for your life in the future. So, speaking of life in the future, speaking of sorrows in the future, let's double-click on suffering, because I believe it's really important. Today, that's very common. People to be, depressed, for people to have, very difficult lives, and sometimes the challenges that our grandparents saw right? In 1930s and 40s with the Second World War and whatnot. Those are very challenging times. The famine, right? And we know that from a lot of places in the world. Those challenges, luckily, we don't have them as much. But there are different challenges these days that we have to really understand. So if you look at suffering, most of the time, in my Ron's example, we are the artisans, we are the creators of our own suffering. The next time you ask a question, God, why me? You should ask, Flavio, why you? Because I'm the one that caused that, right? That's the way it is. If we would practice the law of God, we would spare ourselves many misfortunes, and enjoy a happiness as great as our existence. Very simple. The more you get closer to the laws of God, the happier lives you're going to live. The further away you move from the laws of God, the more difficult, the more challenging, right? Lives, the more sad lives you're going to live. That's the way it is. Spirit's Book, question 921. If I continue, use a very famous poet called Khalil Gibran. He even said that. We choose our joys and sorrows long before we experience them. And notice, this is not a spiritist guy. He's a very famous poet. And he says this, why? Because my grandma, already in the spiritual world, she used to say, my son, if you tell me who we will walk with, I'll tell you who we are. If you show me your friends, I'll tell you. So she had a great way of reading people. And then, don't we do that today? We say, that person, I don't know. It's just not making me a better person. Sometimes you just, right? How do we do that? We're actually choosing our sorrows and joys even before we experience them. And I'm not just talking about relationships, I'm talking about jobs, right? Talking about where we do, sometimes we want to move away from a problem. And guess what? We move, the problem gets worse, gets bigger, gets more difficult. Because the problem is not there, it's here. And you're not looking into those. You're just trying to really mimic, right, the consequences. Khalil Gibran said that. Because we choose our joys and sorrows long before we experience them. If you look at the gospel, we hear this from the Spirit of Truth, that neither wealth nor power, not even a flawed youth, are essential to happiness. So, if you want to be youthful for the rest of your life, think it's going to make you happy, sorry to disappoint you, but that's not going to happen. If you believe that you need to win the lottery to be happy, sorry, that's not going to make you happier. As a matter of fact, there's a Harvard psychologist called Daniel Gilbert. He did a study throughout 20 years, right? A very serious study about 20 years. What drove people to play the lottery? And the interesting thing that he found out, he didn't find out why people play the lottery. Yeah, it's addictive and all those things. But what he found out is that there's no difference. There's no difference between somebody who's a paraplegic or becomes a paraplegic, thanks to a car accident or whatnot, and somebody who wins the lottery 6 months after the fact. So day one, this guy wins the lottery, this guy becomes a paraplegic. Okay? Day 182, the guy that wins the lottery goes like this, super happy, right? Happy, super happy, and then all of a sudden, what happens? He goes into a lot of despair. The guy who becomes a paraplegic goes into a lot of despair, then all of a sudden, he gets his or her life back. And the curve meets again in the 180th day. Usually, longer term, the person who becomes a paraplegic lives a healthier, a happier life than the person who wins the lottery. Believe it or not. 20 years of research. I'll give you one example I saw with my own bare eyes. My wife used to work for a guy that used to have a lot of those like convenience stores, like Store 24, something like that. And one of his partners in that business who wins the lottery. I mean, he's already had some money, right? He had a couple of stores and all that. He wins the lottery. What does he do? He's afraid that his family is going to get close to him to draw some of his money. He just, nope, I'm going to move you out of this house. I'm going to do this. And start changing his own life. He had a swimming pool. He pays so they can close swimming pool because he thought somebody was going to dive in his pool and go crazy to get some insurance money. He was so obsessed with losing his money that he won the lottery that his life became miserable. He was a happy guy. He was a happy person. 6 months, a year, 2 years after, he was miserable. Yeah, he had a brand new luxury car, but he was, as a person, he was miserable. I saw that, right? Nobody told me, even before I read, Dan Gilbert's research on happiness. So, again, but this research, guys, is from it's from 2010, I think, or maybe early 2000s. Gospel was written 150 years ago. Kardec already said, you don't need to be super wealthy to be happy. You don't need to be youth or to be young to be happy. Right? You don't need to have power, fame, fortune. No, nothing like this. What do? Is to really take care of yourself. Because the more selfish you are, the less happy you are going to be. Because selfishness is the source of all vices. Everything starts with selfishness. The more you think about yourself and not the others, the more you think about you and your situation as opposed to others, the less healthy, the less happy, the less peaceful lives you're going to be. On the opposite of that, charity is the source of all virtues. The more charity you practice, the more charitable as a person you are, the more altruistic behaviors you conduct in your own lives, your lives are going to be better. So if you destroy one and develop the other, this should be everybody's effort. Everybody's effort. If you want to achieve happiness now, and even more important, for the future lives or for the future world. So the more charity you practice, the happier as a person you become. That's what this is telling us. So what happens to Maurice? He spends 37 years incarcerated. 37 years. When Daniel Gilbert, Harvard professor, asks him that question, hey, how was that experience for you? He says, it was a glorious experience. Glorious experience? So glorious, the adjective glorious, is usually used when you go to like a religious activity, when it's something that's really transcendental, right? I mean, it's something, wow, it's glorious, right? But that's what he said, right? 37 years, death on death row, 10 years. He did not know if he was going to live one more day. He spent 14 years out of those 37 in solitary. He goes even beyond. I have no regret. I do not have even one moment of regret. Because what does he do? He used every one of his available time to help others in jail, in prison, I'm sure. He used every one of his time to develop the relationships, to help others that needed some help. And he was a role model in prison all those years. Even beyond that, when he leaves prison, what happens? He becomes an advocate, right? Or an activist against death penalty. That's what he does. He traveled all over the world. He passed away 2 years ago. He traveled all over the world. I had a chance to meet him in person. What an angel this guy was, right? So he traveled all over the country, really against marching and really positioning against death penalty. That's what Maurice did. He transformed the very bad, difficult moment, or 37 years of moments, into joyful, into moments of joy, helping others, being there for others, using every single opportunity that he had to make a difference in people's lives. That's what he did. Is that inspiring? Do you have to wait until you go to prison to transform sorrow into joy? Is that the message here? I believe not. I hope not. Because we have an opportunity to do to make a difference in people's lives every day. People we see on the traffic light. People we see, on the highway driving right next to us. Our colleagues at work, our family members. Oh, but that's very difficult, right? Family is kind of, it's difficult. So raise your hand if you have no problems at home, ever. No problems, zero problems. I never get any hands. And then one day, somebody raised their hand. I ask that question all the time. I said, wow, you're the first person that raised your hand when I asked that question. And they said, well, you know what? It's true because, I'm an orphan. And the family that really, fostered me and adopted me took really good care of me. So, well, that's amazing, right? So the only person that raised their hand when I asked that question. But you may be asking yourself, okay, but he actually did kill those detectives, right? He actually killed them. Right, so that, even though it was self-defense, he was fearing for his life, he killed him, right? Yes, he did. But it didn't really stop him. He traveled everywhere. He's 97 years right in this picture. 97 years. No, he died in 2016. 3 years ago. So, 97 years. But, Flavio, I get it. I respect him. But he did kill those detectives, right? Okay, good. So let me give you a different example. This person, Ronald Cotton. I may have shared this before with you guys. 1994, he gets arrested for a crime. A crime that he was indicted by raping Jennifer Thompson. So Ronald was going to work. He worked at a bakery. So he was coming back from work, 5 o'clock in the morning. He was coming back from work. He worked at a bakery. And the police arrested him because they thought that he was the rapist. Jennifer goes in the lineup, and she believed it was him. Innocent. Innocent person. Jennifer believed it was him. The whole environment, right? Such that he goes to jail. This is in North Carolina, Elon College, right? Jennifer, oh yes, the person that raped me went to jail. He's in jail, and he's trying to really fight for his life, right? So in jail, he gets to know that the person who raped Jennifer gets arrested and goes to prison. He meets the person that is the person that caused him to be there. Let's put ourselves in Ronald's shoes for a little bit. Right? So if you go to prison for a crime you did not commit, and then you meet this person, and that person starts making fun of you. Oh, you're here because of the crime that I did. Loser. How would you feel? Probably not very happy, right? Probably not very happy. Then what does he do? He's a religious, grew up Protestant. His father was a minister. He says, I have to kill this guy. He goes and buys a shank, a knife, a prison knife, to commit murder, to kill this guy. His father said, son, that's not the right thing to do, right? God has a plan for this miscarriage of justice. I don't know what the plan is, but God has a plan. So what does he do? It's okay. Throw out the shank and continue serving his sentence, appealing all the time to see his sentence. 10 years go by. He found to be able to a retrial. He was sent to life in prison the first time. He has a new trial. They found some more evidence. Then what happens? He gets the death penalty. Not only did you meet the person who made the crime for you to be there, you were there. And then you try to be retried, and what happens? You get a death penalty. His father says again, Ronald, my son, I truly believe in God. There is a plan for this. Do not move away. Do not lose your conscience. And he tells him. 14 years go by, and thanks to DNA, he was exonerated. Okay, great. He leaves prison. What does he do? I want to meet Jennifer. I want to meet Jennifer. I want to talk to the woman that, right? I want to tell her that I didn't do it. By that time, Jennifer already knew that it wasn't him because of the DNA evidence, right? So she knew it. And then her lawyer advised against, don't go meet him. You don't know what's going to happen. The guy spent 14 years in prison because of you. Are you going to meet him? So for the women in the audience, if you were Jennifer, would you meet him? Depends. Yes, no. For the guys in the audience, sorry, for the boys in the audience, would you meet her? Would you go meet her? Maybe. Depends. I don't think you're being honest with me right now. Right? Because if you put yourself in Ron's shoes, what would you do? You want to tell her that you didn't do it. If you put yourself on Jennifer's shoes, you'll feel so disappointed that you caused that situation to happen. So what happens? They go and meet each other in a place that both lawyers brought them together. And they go and do what? This and that. When they saw each other, they hugged each other and started crying. That hug lasted 27 minutes. I don't know about you, but when was the last time you hugged somebody for 2.7 minutes? Let alone 27 minutes. So they were there hugging each other for 27 minutes. Let's put ourselves on these people's shoes again. Imagine what they felt during that moment. She ruined his life. He was there trying to say, you know what, I didn't do it. She knew he didn't do it. What would you tell her? What would you tell him? Right? He told her simply this. All the time in prison, I want you to do things that I'll be regretful up to this date. The only reason why I didn't do it because my father told me that God has a plan for all this. What happens to them? They go and they meet each other and they write a book called Picking Cotton. The name of the book is Picking Cotton. Why? Because his name is Ron Cotton and she picked him on the lineup. That's them. They travel all over the world trying to really oppose the death penalty. Because he could have been killed by a crime he did not commit. So if you and I go and say, you know what, against death penalty, yeah, it's a person, whatever. But these two, they were heavily involved in the opposition to the death penalty. Thanks to them, some states, handful of states already, ever since this happened, right, 2001, they abolished the death penalty, including Connecticut. So that's what they do. They speak in many countries, universities, 60 Minutes, right? Look at them rallying it. And guess what? They've become very good friends. Jennifer has three kids. The third kid, Ron's, is his godfather. They developed this great relationship. Right? That if you don't stop to think, folks, we don't know what happened to us there. We have no idea. What we know is what can happen to us there. And we control it. We are in the driver's seat. In the example of Ron and Jennifer, that it's a beautiful example. They are the ones that I know that really transformed at, a millionfold, right? A very difficult moment of sorrow into a moment of joy. Doing what they love, trying to convince policymakers, lawmakers to abolish the death penalty. That's what they do. So when his father told him that, God has a plan for everything? Guess what? God has a plan for all of us. But we are at the driver's seat of that plan. We own that plan. Nobody but us can really achieve, right, that plan. But if you're so stuck in those sorrows, if you're so, right, connected with that, you don't think the potential that could happen tomorrow, you're never going to make the leap. You're never going to transition sorrow into joy. So I truly hope that these examples may serve as an inspiration for all of us. Every time we see a moment of sorrow, say, you know what? Tomorrow is going to be a better day. It might be snow, but tomorrow will be sun. It might be cold, but next season will be warm. I might be sad, but later on I'll be happy. A loved one may have passed, and I understand that's the natural law of life. Later on, I understand why that person left. So everything that happens to us, right, we control it. Nobody else. I truly hope that you will live very joyful, blissful, beautiful, and very happy lives. Thank you, and thanks to these amazing folks that have given us their own life examples. Thank you so much. And hopefully your sorrow will turn into joy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Flavio. We wanted to open up for a Q&A. If anyone has any comments or questions. I actually wanted to go first, if that's not so rude of me to go first. I am holding the microphone.
It's all about power. All about power. I can tell you right now.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and I mean this comment, and I hope you feel this in my most sincerest feeling or emotion, or if I had the power to give you something in terms of energy, I would say this was a beautiful presentation. You touched me deeply with your message and being reminded, and it reminds me of Jesus, because bringing Jesus brings hope. And sometimes we forget about the hope that exists out there in the world. So thank you so much for bringing that to us and to all the spirits that are here tonight that needed to hear this message. So thank you so much, Flavio.
Thank you.
So anyone other comments, questions?
It was really beautiful, very touching. Out of those examples, very extreme examples that you gave about the money or the wealth. One, this guy that has a lot of money is able to have a happiness because he's using, like you said, to make others' life better. And the other extreme is this homeless, without any of this, what we perceive as a source of happiness, material wealth. He doesn't have it, but he has things to give that, again, is giving to others that makes him happy. And I'm thinking, what is that is making the difference among this group that has a lot of money, wealth, but cannot be happy? Like the example that you gave, the one that won the lottery, it got so fearful, about his life. And the other, most of the homeless, that they are bitter, feeling bitter, They are all in this planet to test, to go through the trial and expiation.
Correct.
So why there is this few people in each group that are able to transcend and to listen, perhaps, because all of us have our guardian angel, God, some voices that we don't hear but we sense, saying, give what you have to others. Why most of us don't listen to this inner voice that is always coming to us, and that would make the whole difference. the whole difference between be really happy with nothing, or bitter, or they want a lot of money, but still happy because it's given. He must have heard some voice, some inspiration, something that comes from his experience or whatever, that it makes him able to listen to this guide, to whisper. You know, just to see how could we enhance our probability to
Okay,
listen.
that's a fair question.
Yeah, to listen and to be guided better.
How do we enhance our probability to be better guided or to really be more attuned with our guardian angel, right? So it comes back to the one point that I made during the talk. The closer we are to the laws of God, the happier lives we live. When I say closer to the laws of God, right, it's closer to knowing ourselves more. It's closer to teachings like these, right? It's really behaving in a way that Jesus is our professor. It's our inspiration. The more we do that, the more our behaviors, our thoughts and actions, right, our words are aligned with that, the closer we're going to get with the laws of God, and therefore the easier it will be for us to really pay attention to those intuition or voices, whatever you want to call it. That's what we learn from Spiritism. That's why it's really important to study, to continue our own development, right? It's through books, it's through talks and conversations and things that really make us really change our thoughts, or change the way we see the world, new paradigms, and oh, hang on a second, I always thought that doing this, but now I read this book. And by the way, the collection of Andrea Lewis, amazing books that tell us so many great stories of folks that were here in the incarnate world, went back to the discarnate world, and a lot of these situations, the challenges, difficulties. When you read these books, these are better than novellas. These are better than soap operas. Because he's like, oh my God, what's going to happen to her now that she used to betray the guy, that she's married, right? Those are great stories. Then guess what? Some of these stories may come happen to us, right? So my suggestion, folks, studying. Getting to know ourselves better, right? Spending time with folks that are really, giving us more in return, as opposed to those friends that we know they don't really give us much, but just hang out with them anyways because they're being our friends and so forth. Again, that's my take. Every moment that I have an opportunity to, I try to be reading something that really elevates me. Try to be really learning something new that I don't know yet, right? That's what I try to guide myself with. And that's what Jesus taught us. He didn't teach us anything else. The challenge is we lost that message throughout the years, throughout the centuries. I think it's important for us to regain that message back. Right? Helpful?
I don't want to disappoint you by not asking a question. Thank you. Very inspirational.
Thank you.
I'm curious how you are raising your daughters to be generous.
Great question. So we're raising our daughters. Well, that's a much longer answer, but I'll give you the short version of it. So we're trying to raise our daughters to see the world with the perspective that the world is a different place. So, for example, every time, I'll give you this great example. So we were in New York City, and we were sightseeing. This is 3 years ago. They were 3 years old. And they're in Times Square, and then this woman comes to ask money, like a homeless woman. Comes to ask money. And I said, I only have a couple of bucks. Let me give her a couple of bucks, whatever. And one of my daughters, Teresa, said, Daddy, why'd you give her money, that woman money? I said, honey, she doesn't have a home. She doesn't have where to sleep. And she goes, where's she going to sleep? I said, I believe on the street. Daddy, can we bring her to our house? Kids are already generous. Usually, they are there when they begin their lives. The problem is, society corrupts them. What they learn, it derails them. That's why it's really important for parents to spend time, in our opinion, our own personal opinion, with their kids. That age is one of the most precious ages that a human being is going through life. The first 4 years of life are the most important years of a life of a child. That's how you really mold and you build character, right? There are a lot of studies that show the very first year, and that's why a lot of developed countries have a year maternity leave, right? I don't want to turn this into politics, but the more you spend time, the more you're there for them, the more you teach them what's right, the more you teach them that, yes, that person might not be like you, but that's why the dichotomous thinking, she's not like you, she must be bad. No, it's just different. Or the more you teach these things, to accept, the differences, to live with the differences, the more generous they become. And I truly believe that, again, that child must be maybe an even older spirit than we are. So that child that's coming right now is already generous. The challenge is sometimes we remove the generosity, right, from their lives. Don't play with so-and-so, he's mean. Don't do that. And then that's the message, right? That's the message. I'll give you an example that we do all the time. We have our family values that we built as a family in our house. Some of them, we don't go to bed mad with anybody. If something happens, we have to work it out before we go to bed. That's the value that my wife and I got together when we got married. We're never going to sleep mad with each other. It doesn't matter what happens during the day, whatever, we're going to work it out. Even if it means we're going to go to bed 6 o'clock in the morning, we're going to work it out. And some days we did. Some days we didn't sleep, but we worked it out. And when you build these values, right, in your family, in our family, we don't say dirty words. In our family, this is not acceptable, right? If you build these things in your house, nothing's guaranteed, of course. But if you build these things, the likelihood of that small human being who's an immortal spirit like we are, to have generosity, to have kindness, to be honest, right? I'll give you one example that my father did to me. I was 4 years old. I go to this local vending, like a store, and I go buy bread. Whatever, I don't remember what it was. So I bought something. I brought home, and the guy gave me the wrong change. So I got more money. 4 years old. 4 years old. Super happy. Dad, look the money that I got. And my dad said, what money is this? Where'd you come from? Oh, he gave it to me. He said, my son, let me break it to you. He didn't give it to you. He made a mistake. And that money, I didn't work for it, therefore you can't keep it. He made me walk back, crying, all the way to the store to say, I'm sorry, I took this money, but it's not mine. I did that. But that got so imprinted in my head that today I can't touch something that's not mine. That teaching was so important for my honesty today that really drove my behavior today. The question that I have, how many parents take the time to do that? Because sometimes we work too much. Sometimes we do a lot of things, and then you're tired, and it was tough for my dad. He had to come up, and he just come back from work. After working 24-hour shift, he stood up, took me there to give the money back. So the more you invest, right, time, effort, love into the lives of little ones, we hope that the better, right, they'll be, better human beings they'll be.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Flavio.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions and your comments. So we just wanted to take this opportunity to do a short visualization in lieu of our passes. So we're going to turn on the music. Going to dim the light a little bit. And let's all just take a moment to